Welcome to the Human Meme Podcast. I'm David Bowles, and today we will have a conversation about a new fractional fiction novel I wrote, The Corollary of Every Prayer. What does it mean to say Amen? We say it reflexively. The minister concludes the prayer and the congregation responds, Amen. So be it. Let it be done. The word carries the weight of assent, of agreement, of complicity in whatever petition has just been offered to the divine. But what happens when someone refuses to say it? I want to explore the larger project of what I've been calling fractional fiction, because the two are inseparable. The methodology creates the meaning, and the meaning demands the methodology. Let me start with a scene. September 1916, London. A church service during the Great War. The Reverend Mr. Hartley has just concluded a prayer for victory. He's asked God to bless British arms, to strengthen British soldiers, to grant triumph over the enemy. The congregation responds with Amen, all except one woman, Ada Lennox, a widow in her 60s who lost her son in the Boer War and now watches her granddaughter serve as a nurse in France. She sits in silence while everyone around her affirms the prayer. This is not a dramatic gesture. She doesn't stand up and denounce the minister. She doesn't storm out of the church. She simply doesn't speak. She withholds her assent. And that withholding becomes the foundation of everything that follows. Mark Twain understood something about prayers for victory that most people prefer not to examine. In 1905, he wrote a short piece called The War Prayer that was so inflammatory his family refused to publish it during his lifetime. It didn't appear in print until 1923, 13 years after his death. The premise is simple. A stranger enters a church during a prayer for victory and explains what the congregation is actually asking for. When you pray for your soldiers to triumph, you are also praying for the enemy's soldiers to be torn to bloody shreds. When you pray for your nation's victory, you are praying for widows and orphans on the other side. When you pray for glory, you are praying for suffering. This is the corollary. Every prayer for victory contains within it a prayer for destruction. Twain's stranger asks the congregation, You have prayed it. If you still desire it, speak. The messenger of the Most High waits. And of course they still desire it. They always still desire it. The corollary takes Twain's insight and asks, what would it look like if someone actually heard the corollary? Not as an intellectual exercise, but as a lived reality? What would it mean to refuse participation in the collective prayer for victory during a war that was killing millions? Ada Lennox hears it. And her refusal to say Amen connects her to a network of women across Europe who are doing something even more dangerous than refusing to pray. They are witnessing, they are documenting, they are preserving evidence of what the war actually costs, evidence that governments on all sides want destroyed. This is where the fractional fiction methodology becomes essential to the story. Let me explain what fractional fiction means, because I've now written 5 novels using this approach, and I think it deserves a clear articulation. Fractional fiction begins with works in the public domain, literature that belongs to all of us, the cultural inheritance that copyright law, in its wisdom, eventually releases back into the commons. I take these works not as sources to be adapted or retold, but as voices to be synthesized into something new. For the corollary, I drew on 3 primary sources. Twain's The War Prayer, which I've already mentioned, Aristophanes' Lysistrata from 411 BCE, The ancient Greek comedy about women who refuse to sleep with their husbands until the men end the Peloponnesian War. And Hesiod's account of Pandora from Works and Days, written around 700 BCE, which gives us the myth of hope remaining in the jar after all the evils have escaped. These three texts span 25 centuries. They come from radically different cultural contexts. They address different wars, different forms of resistance, different relationships between hope and despair. But they share something essential. They all understand that the official story of war is never the complete story. They all give voice to those who see what power prefers to hide. The fractional in fractional fiction refers to this synthesis. Each source contributes a fraction of the final work. The novel that emerges is not a retelling of any single source, but a new creation that could not exist without all of them. The whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts, but the parts remain visible, acknowledged, honored. In the Corollary, Ada Lennox carries the spirit of Twain's Stranger. She is the one who hears the corollary, who cannot unhear it once she has heard it. Her granddaughter Iris, a nurse at a casualty clearing station in France, carries something of Lysistrata's determination to make the invisible visible. She photographs the wounded, the dying, the dead. She creates a visual record of what the war actually looks like. Images that are forbidden, that could get her court-martialed or worse. Catherine Bryce, a minister's wife in Manchester who can no longer sit silently while her husband preaches the righteousness of war, embodies the moral clarity of Hesiod's hope. Not optimism, not the belief that things will turn out well, but the stubborn refusal to surrender to despair even when despair seems the only rational response. And then there is Margit Erdmann, a German woman married to one of the chemists who helped develop chlorine gas as a weapon. Her husband believes he is shortening the war, saving lives in the long run by making the conflict so terrible that it must end quickly. She knows better. She has seen what gas does to human lungs. She has watched her husband become someone she no longer recognizes. These four women, connected by an Irish nun named Sister Agnes, who has been gathering testimony about the costs of empire for 40 years, form a network that crosses enemy lines. They pass documents through neutral countries. They preserve photographs that governments want burned. They write letters that censors would destroy if they ever saw them. Why does this matter now? We live in an age when the mechanisms of witnessing have never been more sophisticated, and the appetite for looking away has never been greater. We can see atrocities in real time on our phones. We can document injustice with devices we carry in our pockets. The technology of witness has democratized completely. And yet, the corollary still needs to be spoken. We still pray for victory without acknowledging what victory requires. We still support military actions without looking at the bodies. We still speak of national interest without counting the cost to those who are not us. The women in the corollary had to risk imprisonment, exile, even death to preserve their testimony. We risk nothing more than discomfort. And still, we look away. Let me return to Ada Lennox and her silence in that London church. The novel spans from September 1916 to November 1919, from the middle of the war through its aftermath. Ada's small act of conscience, her refusal to say amen, grows into something she never anticipated. She becomes part of a network. She takes risks she would have thought impossible for a woman of her age and class. She discovers that resistance is not a single dramatic gesture but a daily practice, a series of small choices that accumulate into a life. By the end of the novel, Ada is dying. Her health was broken by 2 winters in Holloway Prison, where she was sent for her activities with the network. She knows she will not live to see whether the testimony they gathered will matter, whether the photographs Iris took will ever be shown, whether the letters Catherine wrote will ever be read. But she also knows that the act of witness has value independent of its reception. The corollary was spoken. The truth was preserved. What happens next is not her responsibility. Hope remained in the jar. The Corollary is available now from Bowles Books. You can find it at bowlesbooks.com, where you can also download a free PDF if you want to read before you buy. The paperback and ebook editions are available through Amazon. If you're interested in the fractional fiction methodology, all 5 novels in the series, so far, identify their sources and explain how each public domain work contributed to the final creation. I believe in transparency about influence. I believe in honoring the voices that came before. What prayer are you being asked to affirm? What corollary are you being asked to ignore? What would it mean to sit in silence while everyone around you says Amen? These are not comfortable questions. They're not meant to be. The stranger in Twain's story was not welcomed. The women in the corollary were not thanked for their service. Witnesses rarely are. But the testimony matters. The record matters. The refusal to look away matters, even when looking is unbearable, especially when looking is unbearable. The corollary still needs to be spoken. For the Human Meme Podcast, I'm David Bowles, wishing you a safe evening and a powerful tomorrow. Be a human meme.